It's felt like we had this stupid purchase orders or whatever we had to write them and then print 17 copies. Like, no.
I'll look on there tomorrow and see if there's a way you can do that.
I meant to do it. I truly meant to do it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, if you have a notes section, right?
Yes, I should be able to do that. I just like that.
Not that I'm worried about any of you, but YouTube Live is running. YouTube Live. That's exciting.
No.
Okay, I show it as 6 p.m. This is Marcia Campling. I'm board president. I'm calling this meeting to order. We originally had this meeting set to do our hearing on the USD 268 budget for next year. We are planning on adopting the budget tonight. It will be published the next 2 weeks, and then we'll come back at regular school board meeting, hoping to approve it. So unless there's any discussion, I need a motion to adopt the budget.
After I talk about it.
After Mr. Grover talks about it.
Okay, welcome everybody. If you're on the YouTube stream, your video quality is basically going to be 0 to 1 on a 10-point scale. So if you're in the room and you're speaking or presenting or making comments, you probably need to drop your mask so the people can at least hear the audio. So again, if you're on YouTube, you're probably only going to get audio. And the first section of this is probably not why you're on YouTube, over the 2021 budget. So I would remind you that the whole budget is all of this. And before we go any further, I want to thank Dawn and Mackenzie, who put in hours and hours of work helping make this happen. Basically, what you have in front of you is once we do the large budget, that's what feeds into these documents. The first page that you have is called the open page. One thing I would call your attention to, 4 lines down, the final 2019 assessed valuation was just under $34.8 million. And then if you skip 3 lines, you see the good news, which continues virtually every year. That assessed valuation for 2020 is about $35.6 million, or about $750,000 improvement in assessed valuation. So again, if nothing else changes, those numbers are good and important for our local option budget, is that local tax dollars come from that. Just some little reminders then. In the middle section, the general fund, every piece of property is taxed at 20 mills across the state. Every district in the state receives revenue from that. So that's at 20. It's a consistent number, and it always will be 20 mills unless statute changes it. The 4th line down there is capital outlay. You can see it always trails by a year. Should raise about $270,000, plus we get about 64% state aid on top of that within capital outlay. 4 from the bottom in that area is the mills for the rec center. So it says 3 here, but when we go to the actual budget, you can see that's what we voted to kick. You voted to kick that up to 4. Really, the hardest part about this form is the 4th line down, especially in the current situation. That's probably Brant, sorry. Hi, Brant, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm clear.
All right. We're kind of just a little bit in the middle of the budget hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 4th line down is the hardest part. Like I've said in every email over the last 6 weeks, is projecting enrollment when we still know that 39% of our families have not enrolled. So those are the numbers that drive the budget. So we just have to keep getting that message out. One line that will be in effect in the plan going forward, right there in the middle where the number 190 is that's our weightings for transportation. And that's where we're A, somewhat in a pickle on drivers, but B, we're probably going to have to follow state law this year, where if you live within 2.5 miles or less, we won't be transporting you. And that's going to be a shift for about 55. So that's going to be up to us to communicate, and Kelly's already working on that list with those people. The second page of any questions on that page? And pardon?
Families, 55 kids, 55 families.
55 riders. On the second page, LOB, remember that's local option budget, and you'll see the word supplemental general fund. Those two things are interchanged, but LOB and supplemental general are all local. So if you remember in 2017, you adopted the resolution of 33% on LOB. That number is important when we get to the general fund. The LOB is 33% of that, which you'll see later. And then same thing with the capital outlay in 17 is you can go up to 8 mils, no higher. You can see a little update on the bond there. We've paid off about $3 million on the bond so far, and about 12.4 to go. That moves, going forward, that'll move about $700,000 a year in principal. Okay, the next page is Code 99, and if a taxpayer is interested, that would be the questions that you get. So you see the 2-year ago budget, what we actually spent in 18, 19, and then last year. Then the third column is the proposed budget. So the most important thing to always remember is we are going to propose spending way more money than we're going to spend, but if you don't have it in the budget, you cannot spend it, should something happen in any of those categories. So again, you see on Code 99 on line 6, there's the 20 mills. That far right column is what is a taxpayer most interested in is how many mills, not a taxpayer, but if I'm a property owner, how many mills am I committed to? See, the next line is the LOB, Supplemental General, and we raise an additional $120,000 there, but drop the mill rate 1.3 mills. We have no control over that. The property drives that number. But by the same token, circumstances could cause that number to go up and we would have no control over it. So down on line 62 is bond and interest. So that is 11.86 mils. We're in good shape in a cash position on the bonds. So it would be tempting to maybe overpay some principal down, refi, whatever, but advice continues to hold. That's the only place we really have wiggle room yet. So should we have to raise taxes up in LOB, which would not be our choice, we could come in because of our cash position and lower to balance it out. Because the only line the taxpayer cares about, not the only line, but the biggest line, is line 100, which is 55.2 mils. So what this budget does, you can see last year we're down 0.8 mils. I think that's really good because we raised the rec 1 mil. So even in that picture, the taxpayer's mill rate is only going up 0.2 of a mil. Can you repeat all that after me? Line 24 is food service. We budgeted about an extra $80,000 there. We got a little extra revenue, I would say, from the spring because the federal government stepped in and paid ages 0 to 18. That won't happen this time, and we already know that food prices are quite a bit different than they were just in the spring. So, recap over a 9-year budget. We've passed a $15.4 million bond issue, and the overall mill rate has dropped 8 mils for the taxpayer, which is kind of unheard of.
What did we base our special ed budget?
We based that on Larry's numbers, which he budgeted high. The biggest, what line is that?
30.
Yeah, line 30. So for one thing, we always budget $400,000 to $500,000 higher in special ed because we owe them a big payment before the money ever comes in. So we're always higher coming out of the gate. But then if you'll remember, just last month when you did the transfers, that number showed about a $450,000 balance. So those numbers are always in flux. The big question this year is there's $4 million in contingency, which we talked about carrying over and how to balance all of that.
But is it based on how many kids are receiving services in the district? Is that where Larry's number's coming from?
Yes, like we take
say
on a
Larry's
percentage
numbers.
based on the percentage of the co-op.
So not necessarily more kids receiving services this year since it's up, the budget is about a half
Yeah.
million more than.
Kids don't
what
really
we spent
change.
last
It's that end of year, start of year,
Okay.
get it off the ground.
Okay.
And I will always remind you, by federal law, the government's supposed to be paying 92% of special ed, and they pay 78. So that is a big part, which is distributed over the 9, and now will be distributed over the 4. But I would tell you that's another, forget the services I think we're going to be able to provide. That's a financial piece of where we are promised no more than a 4% increase. So Goddard will be picking up anything over that. Form 150, page 1. This is kind of the formula that feeds into all those numbers we just went over. For example, and no matter what, you don't need to be in panic mode, because no matter what happens, if several people decide to come in and enroll for 1 year at Mays or Andover Virtual School, and we lose them, when you do the budget, there's a variety of ways you can do it. One of which is the worst case scenario. If you have a drastic drop in enrollment, you can take the average over 3 years. Or you can pick the highest of the 3 years. So worst case scenario, we can go off last year's numbers. Not that we want to lose anyone to virtual. And we've already talked, once somebody comes in and talks to us, we need to talk about what we can do remotely if they can't come in, which we'll get to in the plan. So that's where hopefully line 1 then is kind of a worst case scenario number, conservative budgeting. Line 2 is estimating 28 4-year-olds, which are funded at half each. What you're getting out in the far right is the actual FTE of which you get paid $4,569 per FTE. You can see that on line 15. So we catch, which this is huge, we're considered low enrollment, not losing enrollment, we're just considered low enrollment given our size. That is huge on line 4, because we get a weighted enrollment of another 250 kids times $4,500. Line 7 is free lunch. That's always throwing a dart, guessing kind of thing. But so that's where you see the number 190 on line 7, and you take that. Our rate is 0.484. That gets us weightings of 92 students. Line 10, I think, is just really what's going to be critical for us, and that's the transportation line of where we actually land, who we can get here, social distancing, how many drivers do we have. So I know you're aware of that, but that's where you can see the financial impact. It's $185,000 in transportation aid weighting. Then 12 is how we arrive at that special ed number, Rusty. 210 times. The biggest thing about the special ed is it's not included in general fund because the money comes in and we send it straight over. But it is included in the number to figure LOB. So that almost $1 million does get factored into that 33% LOB, even though the money doesn't stay here. So that's how you can see on line 15, we arrive at the general fund number of 6.4 million. And I'm not sure why I included those 2 tables after that, but that's just what we have to use to figure in. And if you skip to page 1, the last page is Form 155. So that's how we arrive at our 6.4 million in general fund. And our supplemental general fund, then you plug in that 6.4 million, and the 33% is 2.128 million. I know that's a quick run of everything, but then that's what factors into all the line items, from individual classrooms to capital outlay to vehicles to fuel to you name it. Any questions? So when we talk about later, for example, we picked up $44,000 in COVID money. That was based on our title numbers out of the elementary school. That's the formula. They used it. We got $44,000 for that. I think we're close to negotiating with the county. The county got $100 million, and their pocket for schools was $3.5 million, which sounds like a lot, but there's over 80,000 students in Sedgwick County. So we're hoping to get between $25 and $30 per student. So that would be about another $25,000 in COVID money. And through supplies from Jerry, the nurses, and just in general, we've almost easily hit that $69,000. So that's what we got to keep in mind going forward, is any request that's going to be out of the norm because of the pandemic, it's probably going to go out of our general fund. There is a little talk in the current second stimulus bill of there being something for schools, but we have not seen that.
Any other questions for Mr. Grover? If not, I need a motion to adopt the budget as presented. Rusty has moved. I need a second. Julie second. All those in favor of adopting the budget, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Brent said it too. Okay.
Forgot about
Okay,
it.
motion carried. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is updating on navigating our change for school.
I think I changed that.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about in the plan is the start of school, which it's hard to read, but each of you should have had a copy or do of the school calendar. I have some more strays if anybody wants to look at one. Basically, there's many choices you have to make. Many of those people are here. I really want to thank all the people that came. A piece of the work that we've been doing was, what should the calendar look like? We had to wait till the State Board of Ed meeting Wednesday, and that was a 5-5 vote, so it didn't make the affirmative. The governor held firm with a recommendation of all schools starting after Labor Day. So you have that as a choice. You have a choice of not doing anything, which would put our original calendar in force, which has a start date of August 13th and only 2 professional days. The committee's work, with a lot of give and take by a lot of people, including me, was to have the first day of school for students be August 19th. The major pieces of the change would be we would double the PD, front loading it for when or if we must move to remote learning, whether it's total or by hybrid, to give teachers more time to have those skills and ideas ready. It would add an extra work day for them at the start of school before students arrive. It adds 10 minutes to the school day. A reminder that you can choose to operate by days or by hours. If your days, it's 186 days of student contact time. If your hours, it is 1,116. This calendar would put us between 45 and 50 hours over that. It would mean you would let the teachers out of 4 contact days, but in essence, we would pick up 6 1/4 contact time of days. And both parties have agreed that we didn't agree on any calendar for 21-22, but we did agree that the contact days would come full circle immediately back to 171 for students. It allows us to shift if we have to going forward with Christmas break, spring break. There's still some There's 4 other green days in there which give us some flexibility should conditions get better or worse of what we might do. Should we be ordered to follow universities? Don't bring them back after Thanksgiving kind of thing. So it gives a good starting point for families who I know are chomping at the bit. When are we starting? What's it look like? And to shift to the actual plan, it's our recommendation that we adopt this calendar to move forward.
I know we can't list all the names of the people on the committee, though I'd love to, but I want to first off say thank you. I know many are probably in the room, but thanks to everyone who helped with this, and we do appreciate all that. The work, hard work that they did to get to this. So we do have that calendar in front of us. For us to have this, we do have to have a motion to approve this calendar, just so the rest of the board is on a wavelength. But other discussion before we get to
Adding the 10 minutes, moving the school start day back 4 days, 6 days to the calendar, that increases the net gain is 6.5
6.25 days, minutes over the course of the calendar.
minus the 4 days we lost with this. That's net 6.
It nets 6.25. So we'll be that much further. To be fair, all research academically shows adding minutes to a school day does not increase anything educationally. The thought process being early on in the year is going to have to be, if you remember the nightmare it was for a quick transition in the spring, much of this will be about, here's your device. If and when we go to remote learning, it will be very little content, but very much procedure, so parents aren't as frustrated trying to help. Give us the opportunity to create tutorials for parents when they're called upon to help. Those kind of things. I would be lying if I stood here and told you those 10 minutes are going to be a huge gain academically. But I think it will pay off in the day-to-day frustrations.
You may not gain educationally, but you're going to not lose educationally because you've got so many other crazy things going on.
Right.
The other things in mind were the temp checks and the time out of class or out of instruction with the hand washing on a regular basis. So the intent was to add more time today for those type of things.
I doubt you can wash your hands 4, 5, 6 times a day in 10 minutes. But, so I think the point's well taken. You're really not adding educational time for 10 minutes or 6 days, whatever.
And I can't be the
It's basically making up for the disruption.
A lot of temp checks are going to take a long time.
We have a lot of sinks in elementary school classrooms.
Every room but one.
I was wondering about that.
So facilities, equipment, we will be ready to go on the 19th. People, meaning.
So a big link on this is everyone enrolling. Our last, not our last shot. Certainly, we'll take people at any time. But when this meeting is over, we will post the calendar. We will post the plan online for people to hopefully gain some comfort level. As we always say, we cannot eliminate all risks. We are doing our best to mitigate it in every angle that we can, and certainly willing to have discussions with individual families about their ability to let their child come or not, and what other possibilities they may be with their individual principals.
if this calendar's.
How was that forgotten?
Yeah, well, I mean, the question is Jerry ready with any cleaning supplies? Is all of that stuff here ready to go by the 19th?
We're in good shape to kick off for several months.
Well, explain the 2-week thing. I mean, are we supposed to be discussing this at length right now to decide this, to approve this tonight? What's the 2-week window, and I mean, how detailed do we need to get into this stuff about supplies and?
if there's I don't think there's any problem with supplies. We're having a little deeper conversation. For example, what lengths, extra lengths do we want to go to? You'll be able to see in the plan about masks, about social distancing, about movement within the buildings. So our conversations start to come down. I know you'll be frustrated if you're watching online, but do we have, in certain areas like lunch, do we need to have extra guards for individual students or not, based on our numbers, based on social distancing, based on the weather? Whenever we can be outside, we will be a lot. So, and I'm not trying to tell you, jumpstart you here, but if we have an idea on the calendar, then they can speak to some of the questions you're asking, and I think start fielding some of those questions once they get through the highlights of the plan, if that makes any sense.
So I think to answer Matt, we had to decide our options. It was either to leave the calendar as is, to not start school after Labor Day, or to adopt this new calendar, which is what this committee is recommending, right?
True, and I will say this, you're the ones who have to raise your hand. You can say, I don't like any of them, start over.
Okay. If a student isn't, a parent isn't comfortable sending their student to class in person, what are their options?
So right now, the first thing will happen, and it's already happened some with the principals. A few families were uncertain. Mr. Woofter had individual conversations. They said, and I know it's hard when you're sitting out there, and I get it if you're sitting out there, is show me your plan and I'll tell you if I'm coming. So I get that, and I think we kind of have that with probably about 30% of our students. So hopefully tonight, by getting the plan out there, we'll either make people more comfortable are coming in, or make people less comfortable, I'm still not coming in, and then we have individual conversations of what that learning might look like. A, if you're not coming in at all, or B, what we, obviously we're concerned about shutdowns during the year, and having to, for example, shut down for 2 or 3 weeks and then open back up, is we want to eliminate families and students of, I like it, no, now I want out, now I want back in. And I know that's a hard call, but there will be options. We don't, if there's 50 kids that just aren't going to come in, we don't want them going to Mays or Andover virtual school. We don't want to lose them. We want to talk to them. For example, at the high school, they can meet with Ashley. We can talk about, or even grade 6-12, of edgenuity and having remote learning opportunities there. We've talked somewhat on the grades. We know, no matter what, we know we probably have 7 students that, given their health conditions, just probably never will be here. So we need to talk about what that looks like, their remote learning. If I'm in the grade school, what teachers might be facilitating that learning, say, in the afternoon or something like that. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
What we don't feel like we're in position, I know big districts are literally letting people mark a box. I want my learning on site. I want my learning remote. I'm most comfortable with one of those two. We don't feel like we're there yet because we don't know how many kids we're talking about. We're not a big enough staff where we can run a remote school and an on-site school. So what we need to find out is get enrolled, and then let's talk about the concerns that you have. Does this help when the principal talks about, if these are your concerns, here's how we're attacking them, and still not then saying, okay, here's what the learning is going to look like if you're not on site.
Yeah, the question is probably more what you said about what happens in November. When flu hits, if there's a second round, and people are still comfortable sending their kids to school, some are not. You KDHE's stance was opposite of the CDC, American College of Pediatricians. Is it gonna come down to another state school board vote to try to determine who's right and who's wrong on that?
If she, right now, and everybody's, kind of up in arms on the state school board vote. Remember, that is a brand-new statute this year for this governor that the legislature passed if they feel like it's an overreach by the governor to shut it all down, it must go past the state school board. So if it's a complete shutdown, meeting with the county, I feel like as long as it's possible, it's going to be local decision, which probably won't mean you. It's going to mean the Sedgwick County Health telling us, you have too much, you've got to shut down for at least 14 days.
Sedgwick County telling Sedgwick County or Sedgwick County telling?
The community, which I feel like if we can really get our guard up and do some things that everybody's not comfortable with, we can control our own destiny, perhaps.
So Gerald Menz would have the authority to say USD 259, you're shutting down Cheney, you can stay open?
Yes. Or vice versa.
Doesn't he
Probably
have a
not.
voting board that
He's
alters
got
some of the
the,
current restrictions that apply to schools?
no. And in fact, they have pretty much now come out and said they will not. They don't necessarily adopt everything he says, but they have not shot him down. In every meeting in the last 2 weeks that we've had with the commissioners, or with Menz, a commissioner has been on as a facilitator with him. So I do feel like they're much more in sync.
I guess a better question would have been, are we going to be working when we start? Otherwise, there's a lot of questions unanswered. We're not going to know until it happens. But can't we anticipate that there's going to be something come up at some point where even if KDHE, Dr. Menz don't have a clear recommendation, there's going to be parents uncomfortable with certain things. Can we not televise classroom instruction
Can I,
where they can watch it or something
For-
that's
for-
simple?
for the middle school and the high school, especially with the committee that was here, I think the teachers have realized they're going to be teaching both ways from the start. They're going to, we're looking at ways, recording their lesson so that it'll be there so that the students who are online can watch it. There's, document forms for people who are at home. They'll have to log how much work they've done. The teachers will be responsible for checking in with them. We feel like the school is as safe as it can be for what we're dealing with. We'd love to have them in class, but we also respect that people might not feel that way, so we're ready to teach either way. It's going to be tough on the teachers. That's why we're asking for some extra time up front for them to train a little bit on how to do online stuff. We did the best that we could those last 9 weeks, and we didn't do great. So we need to, we've learned some stuff, we've got things ready. We just need a couple days to implement those things and get them ready to go, because we do think that hopefully we'll have a very low number that we're teaching outside of the building to start, but eventually, due to flu or other changes, it's going to fluctuate. Somebody might have to be home quarantined for 10 to 14 days. That might be a teacher, that might be a student,
I think
might
maybe,
be a superintendent. I don't know. But we're planning for those things. We're ready for them. The most important part for all of us is building those relationships with kids, is getting them in here, showing them how to use the stuff, gaining that trust of them and the parents, so that when we do have to leave, they know what to do. So the group kind of put together what they felt was the best idea, and we're going to have to do it both. Unfortunately, I'm scared to death that there'll be a time where it'll be everybody that's not in the building. I hope I'm wrong. you know, but we're ready for whichever way we have to go.
Right, and my point is, for me, as a parent of 4 in the district, it's gonna take a lot for me not to want them in class. Now, it's gonna have to be a physical mandate from whoever has that authority. So what I'm fearful as a parent is my kids not being able to attend school in person from day one. And if we don't have a backup plan in place, then I think it's, you're gonna have the majority appear now to wanna come to school, but at some point it's gonna hurt the ones that wanna go to school and don't wanna go to school. We don't have both, working at both from the get-go.
We agree that it's going to take somebody besides us to say we're shutting down, which would be Sedgwick County Health. But I think the elephant in the room is if you're on the fence a little bit, one way or the other, and there's 2 or 3, pick your number, cases, and even we're not told to shut down, we are likely to have families say, that's it, I'm not comfortable sending my child. So that's what part of the plan is. With our plan is contingent upon if you kind of are able to dig into the hybrid part of it. That's some here and some not here. And we plan on that being the worst case scenario until either Sedgwick County Health says you have too many cases for your size, too much clustered or whatever, you got to get out for 14, 21 days, whatever it may be, or the entire state or the region or the country has to go into this complete lockdown. Those are the only scenarios I see us shutting down.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I'm asking questions out of turn. If we're gonna explain all this and like what the quarantine policy is gonna be, because that just changed nationally. Are we talking about all this tonight? I mean, the committee, you said the committee
Here's,
approved this. All I got was emails saying that there's 3 options and some wanted this option, some wanted this option. So I don't vote on this.
Those options, the only thing you're voting on right at this moment is the calendar. The others are not really a vote. As we talk about and highlight the plan, it is a draft. It's a working draft. I see it being a working draft until either there is no more virus or we're completely shut down. Because what no one will do is give us a number. You know, when you reach this number per capita or whatever, you're shut down. So the plan is just more to demonstrate that we will have the ability to shift from everyone being on site, like we would start August 19th, to say, for example, 2 cases in 1 5th grade classroom. And that classroom is told to shut down for 2 weeks. Everybody else keeps moving while we deal with that classroom or a spot within.
I think the connection that Matt's trying to get to is what I'm struggling with too, is I don't think I can approve the calendar unless I know that we have things in place to execute the calendar as best we can.
So let's do this. Let's move to the plan and come, if somebody wants to make a motion to table the calendar, let's move to the plan and come back to the calendar, if that works.
What's the the first question was, what's the 2-week window you mentioned at the very beginning? You said 2 weeks to tentatively approve this, and then is that for community feedback? And then we vote on it at the regular board meeting? There was something about the calendar that we voted on at the
And
regular
then
board
just the
meeting.
budget.
That's just the budget.
That's
And
just the
then
budget, nothing to do with the
2
calendar.
weeks.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
We gotta wait 2 weeks before we final approve.
Okay,
Gotta be,
so, but, yeah, this is approved now, so the
Just
plan will
one.
explain all this.
Yeah, if you're not comfortable with the calendar, if someone make a motion to table it,
I would motion that we table the calendar until we review the plan.
Jared's made a motion, I need a second. Rusty second, all those in favor say aye.
okay, so let's talk about then going to the plan, and if you have specific questions in that, we can talk about some of those things that Todd put up, as well as what it looks like going from on-site to hybrid to remote and moving within those 3 frames.
All right, who's talking?
Apparently you. No.
If you'll go ahead and scroll down, let's get to the meat of it.
This is one you showed us.
This is the one that you have already seen.
Mark,
What-
you might want to stand over here.
What this represents, and I'll talk for the first part of this, is the work that both committees did together. So what we did was we had the committee together, and then we broke up, and the elementary committee met for a week and developed an elementary plan, and the middle school, high school had their plan as well. This is what is common between those two plans for a whole USD 268 plan. So understand that when we're looking at this plan as USD 268, the elementary plan is very much more detailed as far as, how we're going to eat lunch, where we're going to sit, where we're going to go out for recess, who's going to cover recess. When we get to the remote plan, where those plans or where that will take place, who's going to cover it, all of those are outlined in each individual building plan. But just for the 268 plan, face coverings, we will follow the executive order, which means that all students and all staff will have their face covered when they enter the building. Temperature checks, same. We will follow the executive order. Yes?
Is that not, we're not waiting on the potential revision to the kids from kindergarten to 5th grade? I mean, they're at this point required to mask, but that very likely could change.
At this point, with the executive order, you are correct. It has gone back and forth and back and forth. We had to land on something in order to open the doors. So we landed on this. If it changes, we will change it.
So sorry, but we do have flexibility to change that, or we don't?
We can
It has to be
only
changed
make
to-
it more
Well, but
restricted.
we
Cannot
can't,
make
so,
it less restricted.
so,
Right,
because I think,
right now it's a governor mandate. That was part of her plan.
Right.
K
The
through-
Second executive order.
right, that's what's confusing a little bit to the world, is that, the governor said something and then the state board said something else, and so now we have flexibility on the calendar. The governor said something about face coverings, and we don't have flexibility there. That is what it is.
Right.
So there were
The
two.
executive-
There were two executive orders.
Right.
Right.
This is the one that did not change with the state board. The one that changed with the state board was 2058. This is 2059. Okay. Temperature checks. We will check all students at the door, all staff as they walk in. At the elementary level, we have three doors that we will open and have staff at those doors. On the bus, they will take their temperature check before they get on the bus. Real Kids, which is a before school program, will have theirs checked there. So what we are planning to do at the grade school to kind of make this a little fun is to stamp their hand when they get their temperature check. That means they're clear to come in, and then their challenge is to wash that stamp off and make sure that they get it off before the end of the day, which leads us right into hand washing. We feel strongly that hand washing is much more beneficial than the sanitizer. We will have sanitizer in every classroom, but we are going to encourage hand washing for 20 seconds at a minimum on every hour. We've changed our schedule so that kids will go out to recess after they eat rather than before they eat lunch, which will give them an opportunity to go into the lunchroom with clean hands and be able to get that done. Cleaning procedures. We will make sure that all shared spaces are cleaned regularly between students. Individual spaces at the end of the day, and there is a fogger in each building that will come around and disinfect each classroom every evening. Social distancing, again outlined within the executive order. And that is going to need to be taught at the elementary, and I'm certain at the middle school and high school as well. That's difficult, that social distancing. We do have room in our classrooms to social distance, and I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about lunch. We have all of that outlined. We have tables figured out, seating charts figured out, hallway movement figured out. But our little ones like to hug, and they like to be close, and they like to talk, and so that's going to be the challenge. When you come into the building, there will be signs everywhere. Signs on how to wash your hands, signs on whether or not you have the assurances in place to be there, as far as asking students those guiding questions or those screening questions before they arrive at the school. So we have all of those all that signage ready to go. Gentlemen, you're next.
What is the data on hand washing over hand sanitizer? I'm not familiar with that, and is it realistic that a 6-year-old is actually going to wash their hands for 20 seconds?
20 seconds is a long time, and we will have to teach that as a procedure. You are exactly right. We had talked in our committee that ideally, yes, we would like them to wash their hands because at our level, hands get dirty. Sanitizer doesn't clean the hand, it disinfects the hand. This will, by washing, it'll get cleaned off.
Is there any medical support for that's better at preventing the transmission of this virus?
I have not read that.
Every meeting I've been on has been a stress of hand washing being better than sanitizer. So the elementaries had some really good ideas. These are specific times where we were working hand washing, and then kind of on the hour, here's where we can work in on sanitizing.
We'd even talked about splitting the class in half to where half will sanitize and half will wash, cutting down on the time that it takes. And the next time we do it, we flip so that that valuable educational time isn't eaten up all day with just washing your hands.
Hey, Mark, question or clarification on the masks. So let's pretend I'm a 4th grader. So I get coming to school, my temperature taken, my mask will be on, go to class. Is there any time during the day I cannot take my mask off that I'm free of the mask? In the classroom, I'm thinking, especially that all important, seeing those lips move, especially the teacher delivering the curriculum right. Are we making any provisions in the classroom to be able to remove the mask?
We absolutely have to have a time, as long as we are social distanced, that they can respond to the teacher. The teacher, they have to see the mouth move,
Right.
especially in those K2 classrooms where that's very essential. So yes, there will be that time. And also we talked about building in time to our day to go outside to get those masks off, because you and I both know that if you sit with a mask on for 7 hours a day and don't take it off, it starts to play with you a little bit. So yes, there will be times we're going to encourage outside classrooms. We're going to encourage mental health breaks to go just outside for 5-10 minutes and let's breathe and get this done. Also, when we're teaching any type of reading that we have to see the face, have to see the mouth move, and we are social distanced, then yes, we can.
Thanks for clarification, because I've heard a lot of that's some concern of parents. It's like, oh, what are we going to do? Make them wear masks all day except to eat. And I think that helps. I think that's good part of the plan. So, yeah, I know some of our rooms do not have that 6 feet. Even if you have 15 kids in there, it's very difficult to get that 6 feet. So, I think that's important that we make focus on making sure if we can't do it, we're going to have to wear the mask. Otherwise, we have to figure another plan. So, thank you.
Next up is classroom procedures. Excuse me, classroom procedures, shared spaces. We're looking at portable clear shields between students when possible. So if they're doing still possibly group work, things of that nature. But wear the face coverings as the governor's ordered, unless that changes between now and then. All desks will be facing the same direction, which is something that they said that way nobody's really face to face as much. Face-to-face distance, not desk-to-desk, is what we're measuring the 6 foot by. One of the other things that KSDE has asked us to do is that in case there is a case of COVID, we can track it. So seating charts will be used. That doesn't mean that the teacher has to assign the seats. It's just that they keep track of where students are sitting and who's sitting next to each other. Distance is possible as much as we can. Air movement. If your rooms have windows and the doors, those will be open as much as possible to keep the airflow going through. Fans are encouraged in the classrooms. In addition, Mr. Feast, Jerry, has changed it so that the air conditioner, instead of a 10% sucking in outside air, it's going to be 25% sucking in outside air. So even classes that don't have windows, we're going to get as much outdoor air as possible. And to go back to your question a little bit, Mr. Schlusser, even middle school and high school, we're going to try and get them outside, moving around a little bit if the weather's nice. Even if the lesson is possible, teaching outside as much as possible. That way students can get more than 6 feet apart. They can take that mask off because even for the kids and the adults, you need that. So here it says outdoor classroom and activities. We're going to do that as much as possible. I know that we're looking into the possibility of a big, like a fireworks tent for band, so that the band kids can still remain far enough apart and be outside and do different things. If the weather's, permissible, though, be outside as much as we can. Furniture, we're removing all unnecessary furniture, and I kind of giggle there because what we have to do here really goes against a lot of what we believe in. We want the kids to be comfortable. We want, them to have things that they feel comfortable with, but we really have to, cut down on the stuff as much as possible. There will be no fabric covered furniture, no blankets, things like that. Kids will have to bring in, their own hoodies and coats, things of that nature. Teachers won't be able to provide blankets, things of that nature. So we're getting all of those things out of there to make the classroom environment as comfortable, I shouldn't say as comfortable, but as clean and as able for us to continue learning as much as possible so that we mitigate the spread.
I have a
Brings
question
us-
on
Yes,
that.
ma'am.
As far as the furniture goes, they were supposed to have the desks facing the same direction.
Yes, ma'am.
I know we have a lot of classrooms with tables
Tables.
and things. Do we have enough desks to replace those, or what is the plan for that?
Well, like right now, let's say that the teacher was over there. So we would ask those students that are facing this way to simply turn their chairs for the instruction part of it so all heads are facing the same direction. But then when you go to work time, individual work time, all students should have on face coverings. So even if they would be facing each other, they'd be looking down and working if we continued with tables. It's also where the plastic dividers might come in if we're doing group work and things of that nature.
Are we actively making those dividers? Do we have somebody? I know that's a lot of
You
work.
know that as this thing has gone on, people have jacked up prices and things get harder and harder to find. The 1/4-inch plexiglass, the prices.
Way up.
But we have. If you go to any one of the offices now, Jerry and the group that's working this summer has hung a big piece of plexiglass. So there is a divider between the administrative assistant and whoever comes into the office. We're going to have one in the library. We're looking at, is that a good idea at tables, or is it better to space them so that there's nobody directly across from them? There's all sorts of things. And then companies have come out now and they're selling, plastic dividers and things like that, but you have to look at how tall they are and would they really do what we want them to do. But yes, we're trying as much as possible to continue the great learning that, those things that kids love to do and the teachers love to teach. but we have to do it in a way that everybody's guaranteed to be safe also, or that mitigates the spread. I shouldn't say the word safe, mitigates the spread. That's anything else? Right.
I would just say that two primary things, and you've heard several presentations in the last few years on flexible seating and things teachers feel like they can accomplish, is going to be virtually impossible. And small group work, of which all kinds of successful strategies have come from, is going to be really difficult to maintain or implement very often, if at all. So that's going to be our two biggest educational hurdles, just from an arrangement standpoint in the classroom.
The next section there is common spaces, and on the far left column there, the first one that it addresses is hallways, and I'm just going to hit on the key points here. We have dictated flow in the hallways between classes. Everybody will be going the same way, and there won't be traffic interacting. We're going to utilize the courtyard out here for typically during the day that's not used, but it will allow us to take students in one direction from the hallway right outside the library here to the commons area, and then the subsequent hallway to the east, back behind the middle school gym, would be traffic flow would be in the opposite direction. So it's all directional. Students are going to be monitored, obviously, to go from one destination to the other. Lunch.
Real quick too, because it's not in here. It's enough. We're not utilizing lockers this year. Students will carry backpacks, so there's no reason for students to stop and congregate at lockers. Go ahead, sorry.
Lunch, visitors will not be permitted in the lunchroom. We will have seating charts, no shared food, disposable food trays and utensils. Heidi Wells was part of our planning last week too, and was in and went through a number of scenarios and provided a lot of good insight there. We will sanitize tables between lunches. We realize our lunches can be 80 to 90 people. I'm going to encourage lunch passes to go home this year like never before. We do have a lot of kids high school anyway that do go home, but that process will still be there for them. We realize, I was talking to Esther today just about getting a feel for additional chairs, because we realize we're going to have to set up some tables and set up some chairs. And good thing we kept all the old metal chairs underneath the stage in the old middle school gym. So we've got lots of the old style fold-up chairs. I said, do we have 100? And she said, 300. So anyway, we realize we're going to have to set up our commons a little bit differently. Social distancing will be a challenge, but just to keep them separated as they go through the same lunch line is going to be something that we're just going to have to monitor from the outset.
Can you
Yep.
utilize other places?
Sure.
Like the courtyard and the gym or the what? I mean, the gym you're using it, but
No.
I mean, are there other places you can stick kids to eat rather than just in the?
Yes, good point. Courtyard is always open, weather permitting. We're not opposed to letting them out on the front sidewalk, just out the front doors out there. If again, weather permitting, we could utilize the stadium if we wanted to. I think it's those not so good weather days that will be more of our challenge. And that may be as simple as, the PE kids typically go to lunch and eat in the lunchroom. Maybe the PE kids go get their lunch and they go back and space accordingly in the mezzanine, gymnasium, places like that. So potentially even classrooms. And we would look at classrooms with hard surface floors before carpeted rooms. Next, let's see here. I mentioned sanitizing between bus is the next section here. Face coverings obviously will be part of the routine for bus riders, as will temperature checks. And I think it was mentioned before, those will be done before the student loads the bus. There will be assigned seating. Loading will be from back to front, so you don't have try to avoiding the face-to-face pass by and all. Opening the windows as much as possible on the bus. Ron mentioned that for school building as well. And obviously keeping social distance at the bus stops will be something that the drivers will probably be preaching to the kids, and hopefully parents will help us with that as well. The next section is office. Ron mentioned the plexiglass dividers. We don't have ours yet in the high school, so don't run down there to take a look. But tomorrow Jerry is installing, because we have enrollment coming up, payday on Thursday, so we'll have parents coming in. But there will be hanging, I think they're 3x5 sheets of plexiglass in front of the receptionist in the school buildings. Sign-in, sign-out forms will not be something that we really practice. We will use the buzz-in. It'll be more like, if you come to the front doors, can I help you? If it's something that you're there to drop off for your child or something, there'll be a drop box there. Leave it in the drop box. We'll see to it your child gets that. Again, anybody that comes in would have to be masked, and we'll try to do as much as we can just at the door without any visitors coming on in. We know there will be times where we've maybe requested for a parent to come in, something like that, so we would meet them at the door, buzz them in, and take care of the business that we had scheduled to take care of. Yep.
Just thought of on the visitors at the door, when they buzz in, they're gonna be masked. Is there a procedure talking about asking them to lower their masks so we can see who they are?
I don't know that we've mentioned that specifically, but it's an easy thing to,
because,
yeah.
I mean, it's all about
Yep.
safety. We don't want the wrong people coming in the doors.
Yeah, and seldom will we buzz them on in. It'll be more like, you're dropping something off, leave it in the drop box, or if it's something
I see sometimes I go somewhere and someone calls me by name, and I look at them and they got a mask on. I have no idea who they are.
Yeah. And our people are pretty good about that anyway, because we haven't been letting people in if we didn't recognize who they were. So that'll just kind of be a continuation. Just limit non-essential visitors. Mention the barriers, using the remote entry and drop box. The nurse's office, I think, is the bottom one there. We will have a protected area. They call it an isolation space. We didn't really love that term because it sounds like we're going to go lock somebody's kid in a corner and pull the door shut. And but we do have to have in our buildings a place if a child has symptoms of that, we've got to take them out of the mainstream and place them somewhere. We would then contact the nurses for a quick screen there, but we have to have that place identified in each of our buildings. So that hits several spaces: commons, hallway, nurse's office, and office.
So Mr. Haig has worked on some user-friendly handouts of what they just talked about that we can put out. Lori, you have to pull those up?
Here's one for transportation, makes our public statements, and then gives all the health and safety procedures on the side. Easy to see, one page for transportation. And then,
And did you have the 2.5 on there?
right here.
Now, one thing I would say, and I know it's frustrating if you're following us online, you're getting audio only, but I would say this up front: if your student rides the bus, I know it's a hardship, but the best thing anybody can do with a rider is bring them to school and not count on us for transportation. That doesn't mean that we're not going to transport, but if it's optional. And one of the surveys that will probably follow in the next few days would say if a big part of the reason, and I know it is for many families, the reason you put them on transportation is because you have to get to work and you can't wait till 7:40. Perhaps a compromise can be, if there's enough of that, we have a before school program that if you will transport them and we'll take care of them, and in turn we're not responsible for the transportation. So if you get a survey question like that, that's kind of what that's hinting at regarding transportation on buses for sure.
And then this is the one for school buildings. Again, it just gives a bulleted list of what we'll be doing within the school. And then this flyer is for food service. So we have what food service is gonna look like. One nice neat page.
So that's really a lot of what's in there, but I know Jen is here, and I don't know if you want to address anything, or if you feel like there's gaps that weren't touched on from a health and safety standpoint, if anybody wants to ask any questions in that area.
Anything we do, is that posted out on our website, I'm assuming, or the
Uh,
guidelines?
Yes.
Yes.
Our goal tonight is to put the calendar and I know it's frustrating, but basically this is going to be a draft, a working draft that's just forever ongoing. A great example is the mask mandate to optional to mandate in a 72-hour period just within the county. So some things we will have control over, many we will not. We will only put out what we know at that moment in time.
Can we, I should say, I don't think we should assume that every parent or teacher even may know the comorbidities that put them at increased risk. It's exceedingly rare to die from this disease under 45 without a major comorbidity. But that includes hypertension, things that, for children may be on steroids for arthritis or something weakening their immune system. I think liability, we have to at least say, you don't have to list every possible medical condition that makes them higher risk, but if you're on any medication, if you have any, you need to discuss this with your doctor, pediatrician, and get their opinion on whether you should attend. And I think everybody will be able to attend. But there are some conditions that put them at risk, vasculitis, that you would never think of was going to associate it with a viral-related pneumonia.
Does the CDC put something like that out? Seemed like I read something.
They put their high-risk factors, the main ones.
What's that?
Obesity. Obesity is a major risk factor. And that doesn't take much to qualify for obesity. A BMI of 35, that's a reasonable percent of the population. 40% is obese in America. And it's a risk factor. So I think I just think that there may be just a one-line something to say if you are on any chronic medical conditions, discuss this with your doctor. There's so many things that you wouldn't put as a risk factor to the potential for this. Please discuss with your primary care provider or health provider.
Would you be willing to draft something like that doesn't put your name on it, but is just used
Sure.
as a reference
Sure.
tool in the packet?
I'll run it through pediatrics and internal medicine, so we get the adult and pediatric side of it. But yeah, maybe very simple. I just think a lot of these children that, the few that have died from this, almost all have had comorbidities, but not every single one. Most of them had. I have to assume that they may not have known that particular thing had anything to do with their increased risk. So,
Where would you put something like that? I mean, would it be?
Well, something like this. I mean, I think the community's pretty on edge about this decision and about the details of it. I don't think it'd be too hard to get to the majority.
We early on, don't we have the link to symptoms on both, which it could go right with that, or maybe lead before the symptoms even.
And it's certainly not a mandate. You can come to school.
Oh, for sure.
My youngest has a comorbidity, asthma, severe asthma. He's going to school. But they need to, some may not know that. And if they would discuss it with their health care provider, and they say, wait a minute, this is they've been on oral steroids, something totally unrelated, but compromise something. let their doctor and them discuss that.
Anything, Jen, we missed? I know there's a lot of things we're still negotiating as we go forward.
In addition to pre-existing or medications or whatever, we really need to relay the message of transparency and communication on all levels. So, staff, between us, parents, between us and our kids, situations. I think that is what is going to be key in controlling it in our community.
And I don't, as we talked, people have to be confident that there is one central site that they can go to, which probably means our website of just the constant update. And Brad even has the date, so you know when something was changed. Because I know if we keep communicating by power announcement, it starts to get lost. And as well, you know, over half the community isn't going to be involved in a power announcement, so then it becomes secondhand information, and that's obviously where all the troubles come in play.
So again, I think the question is, do you have everything you need to execute this plan for one of the calendar options, for the calendar option that has been recommended? Can you effectively implement everything that you just presented by the 19th?
Yes. What we really need is, I don't even know how you would word it, but what we really need is a motion to move forward with the draft as presented, and then a separate motion to adopt the calendar, which will let people go to work. You know, in my mind, a lot of that is just surface stuff. They've got to be able to get in now and start doing the work of actually having the kids show up, the academic piece that follows the procedures.
So we have a motion by Carla to proceed with these guidelines. It's been recommended. I need a second. Julie has seconded. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Brent, you still out there?
Aye.
Did he say aye?
He said aye.
Aye, okay, motion carried. Then we need a motion to, well, it's one of the three, but I'm assuming the motion will be to adopt this calendar. With that motion.
One more question before we adopt this.
Okay.
What is the child gets it? The CDC now recommends 10-day quarantine over 14. Are we still following Joe Men's, KDHE?
What we are responsible for is when somebody tests positive and notifies us, we're to tell them and help them with contact tracing. But I already know the frustration with patient privacy rights. If somebody in the room right now has tested positive but can choose not to tell us, and I don't know how to get to the other side of that mountain, so we're just going to have to stress with families that we will keep it. We will never tell anybody that someone has tested positive, but that's the only way that we can work with Sedgwick County Health is knowing where it's at. And that's going to be dependent upon the people that test positive. I don't know if I answered your question in there.
What is the plan?
If a child gets it and they're going to be quarantined at home, is it then the Sedgwick County Commission?
It is
KDHE
it is Sedgwick County Health.
Sedgwick County Health, Joe Men's.
Yes, or his office. A lot of times we've been working with Adrian.
So those guidelines will dictate the quarantine
Right.
for staff and students.
And I know it's going to be hard for parents, but already a lot of talk is if it is that third grade child, it could be as simple as that child is quarantined, no one else has symptoms, and life goes on in the school. That's a hard that's a hard bridge to cross if you're not even sure to begin with if you're sending your child. So we're just going to have to talk it out and work it out with individual families. Just because the obvious that there's going to be people is, wow, my child is way too close to that. I want to remove them, and that's how we're going to. That is why the hybrid, which is the hardest teaching model of teaching some students live, you can't just flip on the computer, teach the people that are with you live, and Zoom with the people that are not live. So that's our great challenge in that model. But it's one that's going to happen. It's probably going to start that way for some teachers on day one, because we know some kids are just not coming in. So yes, for 99%, the doors are going to be open and we go, but there's 10 or less we know of right now that probably will never come as long as the virus is potentially there.
I guess I feel like everything is such a moving target. I mean, everything. So we can question and ask and wonder, but regardless of what calendar we choose, all of those things are going to remain.
Yes.
So
The goal.
I do move that we accept the number 3. That was
Again,
based on
the goal of the calendar is an earlier start than many of our surrounding districts, and who knows what it's going to be like in 3.5 weeks. But if we can get the students here and let them get to know their teachers, know the adults in their building, and talk about, for if and when we are not here, this is what it looks like for you. This is what it looks like at home. Here's how you do some of these assignments. I think will be light years ahead of what happened in the spring.
and light years ahead of whoever starts on Labor Day.
So what other discussion, because we do have a motion on the floor.
Just a comment, I too appreciate all the work that the committees have done and this administration at school. I've been a board member, I've heard both sides, both ends of the spectrum as well, so it is very difficult, but, I'm in full support of get these kids back. Back to where Jared's asked a couple times tonight, are we ready on the 19th? And, I hear confidence in Mr. Grover, even though I think some on staff may not be quite as confident, but I think it's a good starting place. And as long as we can get them in here and get them understanding the new world they're going to be taught in. There's going to be risk. It's all about mitigating the risk. That's why I keep asking about the safety questions. I know you guys will teach, our kids will be taught, the ones that we can reach, but it really is about mitigating the risk and the safety and it's a hopefully a short window left in this mess we're living in. So thank you for the committee and work.
The worst part about this is school board members who ran for an entirely different reason, and I think this community can battle that, but school board members are not politicians, but it has landed completely in our local laps. There's a lot of good to be said about that because we can make some of these decisions that we feel fit here, but I would just urge the public to just understand school board members are not politicians and are not making political decisions.
There's no right answer that we have here tonight is the way I look at it. That we put our trust in these people that have been on this committee, and I do trust them. So we have a motion to accept this calendar. So and Matt has seconded it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Grant?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Motion is carried. Calendar is set. Thank you. Anything else for tonight? Okay. Thank you all. Thank you all.
This is a hard time, and just like what Rusty said, when we were looking at this calendar, we just really had to think about, we want to see our kids, and in the safest way possible, and so we appreciate your guys' support and trusting us too, but we just really felt like that was we want to see them before the potential of us not getting to see them, if that makes sense to understand, but thank you for your guys' support of us.
Okay.
No executive session.
No executive session. I need a motion to adjourn. Julie, Rusty, motion carries. We're done.
Thank you.